Welcome. Today, we're looking at our ocean's incredibly vibrant coral reefs. But not just as beautiful ecosystems, we're looking at them as living, breathing patients. And right now, well, these patients are facing a really profound medical mystery, a complex, overlapping epidemic of intense stressors. So we're going to treat this explainer like a marine pathology report. We'll break down the exact diagnoses, tearing through these incredible underwater cities so we can finally understand what it really takes to heal them.
So what actually happens when an entire coral reef gets sick? Well, it's almost never just a single ailment in isolation. Today, we're stepping into the role of ecosystem doctors to diagnose the specific, devastating conditions that are fundamentally altering reefs around the globe. We're going to look at exactly what is happening under the water right now and how researchers are fighting back.
Section 1. The Coral Stress Epidemic. Okay, let's dive into this.
Coral reefs are increasingly strained by a really devastating mix of stress triggers. We're talking about sudden disease outbreaks, accelerated tissue loss, and massive bleaching driven by high sea temperatures. But the real danger here? These aren't just happening one at a time. Many reefs are actually experiencing more than one of these severe stressors in the exact same season. This crazy overlap makes natural recovery incredibly difficult, and obviously it raises massive concerns for all the communities and ecosystems that depend entirely on a healthy reef.
Section 2. Diagnosing tissue loss. When the living coral tissue literally vanishes, it leaves the stark, bare white skeleton completely exposed to the elements. It's really quite shocking to see. Out in the field, marine scientists don't just note that this is happening. They're meticulously tracking the exact speed of this progression. They're watching to see if it's actively jumping to neighboring healthy colonies, kind of like tracking a virus.
Now, this tissue loss manifests differently depending on the specific coral species. Sometimes it shows up as a progressing band, which is exactly what it sounds like, a visible, creeping line of necrosis just marching right across the colony. Other times, it's stark skeleton exposure, where you literally just see that bare white structure. Or you might notice a distinct change in surface texture, where the coral appears kind of shrunken or heavily eroded.
At the root of this whole thing, in many cases at least, tissue loss is strongly associated with microbial imbalances right on the coral surface and within its mucus layer. You can think of these like really aggressive secondary infections. And unfortunately, they're severely intensified by external environmental factors. Warmer water temperatures, heavy sedimentation, nutrient pollution, and direct physical damage, they all gang up to make these microbial imbalances much, much worse.
Section 3. Bleaching. A heat response.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it highlights the absolute key to a coral's survival, zooxanthellae. These are tiny, symbiotic algae living right inside the coral's tissues. Seriously, this microscopic partnership is everything. These algae are what provide the coral with its vibrant colors and, most importantly, its primary source of daily energy.
But when the ocean environment drastically changes, and usually we're talking about sustained heat stress here, that vital partnership completely breaks down. The coral gets so stressed that it's literally forced to expel those essential zooxanthellae. Without them, it turns completely white. Now, it's important to note, a bleached coral isn't dead yet, but it has just lost its main energy source, leaving it incredibly, incredibly vulnerable.
You can really think of it like a severely compromised immune system. Prolonged bleaching causes this huge cascading failure for the coral. You see a decreased ability to grow, vastly reduced reproductive capacity, and a devastated natural resistance to pretty much everything else. And of course, this makes corals highly susceptible to the very disease and tissue loss outbreaks we were just diagnosing earlier, heavily raising mortality rates over time.
Section 4. RTN vs. STN explained.
And this brilliantly illustrates how we categorize necrosis, basically by two very different speeds of decline. First, you have RTN, or Rapid Tissue Necrosis. This is incredibly aggressive, literally stripping a colony bare in just a matter of days or sometimes weeks. Then, on the flip side, you have STN, or Slow Tissue Necrosis. This represents a much more gradual, creeping degradation.
Now, while the underlying biology definitely varies depending on the specific coral species and the local conditions, researchers are out there acting like detectives, piecing together clues. They're consistently linking these RTN and STN patterns to a few main culprits. They're looking for direct links to temperature anomalies, severe water quality fluctuations, and the presence of specific microbial communities thriving right at the very edge of the tissue loss. Ultimately, having these specific labels just helps scientists clearly and quickly communicate exactly how aggressively a disease is advancing on a reef.
Section 5. The compounding threat.
In real-world reef systems, bleaching, tissue loss, and those RTN or STN patterns often strike simultaneously or at least in very rapid sequence. This creates a terrifying cascading failure. Let's walk through it step by step. Step 1. Heat stress severely weakens the corals and drastically alters their natural immune responses. Step 2. Local pollution or repeated physical disturbances step in, increasing the microbial pressure on that already weakened ecosystem. And finally, Step 3. Once that tissue begins to decline, any remaining healthy tissue immediately becomes a highly vulnerable target, allowing the disease to just progress and completely take over the host. So the crucial point is this. The danger doesn't just vanish because the water cools down at the end of the summer. This overlap is exactly why reef recovery is so painfully slow. Think about it. Even if a massive bleaching episode finally ends, the corals still face that ongoing, intense disease pressure. That lingering pressure severely limits any chance of regrowth and dramatically increases the odds of further, devastating losses. It is basically a compounding, vicious cycle.
Section 6. Restoring reef resilience. But hey, ecosystem managers aren't just sitting around watching this happen. They are actively fighting back. Their primary focus areas start with early detection, basically trying to catch these outbreaks as early as possible. Next up, they're protecting herbivores to keep harmful algae in check. They're also working hard on reducing sediment and nutrient runoff to improve overall water quality. And finally, they're actively supporting specific coral populations that naturally show better recovery after these extreme heat events.
On the research side of things, scientists are continuously refining their diagnostic tools. They're pairing direct field observations with some really cutting-edge microbiome and environmental data. The ultimate goal here is to pinpoint exactly which specific mechanisms are dominating any given outbreak, so they can tailor their response perfectly.
Which kind of leaves us pondering this final, really profound question. As these diagnostic tools continue to evolve, can we actually forecast exactly where risks are rising and stop the next outbreak before it even begins? Understanding the symptoms of tissue loss and bleaching is a massive step forward for sure, but predicting overall ecosystem health, that's the ultimate goal for the future of marine conservation. Thank you so much for joining me to decode this critical explainer today. Keep looking deeper, and I'll catch you on the next one.